Okay, so welcome back. Welcome back, welcome back. Hello. As Q and I were walking around and hearing some of the conversation, it certainly sounds like there were lots of reactions. For some people, what was in the DVD was new information, things that hadn't been part of your experience, things you hadn't heard about, lived through. For others, this is your life on screen, or what you saw on screen has informed the experiences you had in your life. And so we want to hear from, we had asked that there's one person who was sort of scribing or taking notes, and he helped us with some instructions earlier. We want this to go for about 5 minutes. So your report out should really be a general overview, not this person said this, and this person said that, and this person said this, and then there was another thing, and in 2nd grade this happened, and in 4th grade this happened. We don't need the full life story. We just want to get 1 or 2 highlights. If another group said one of your highlights, you can pass. We just want to kind of hear what were some of the trends or themes in your conversation. So is there a group that would like to go first?
We want to go first.
You want to go first?
Yeah. I'm burning over here. Oh my God. Hey, that video, I'm Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
It was just like looking at a picture of history repeating itself. I mean, it was emotional for me, you know, just watching that because, like I was telling our group, I live in Wickham Court, and it's in the catchment area. They closed our school over there, our elementary school, and basically forgot about it. You know, it's just something that's there that's waiting to be knocked down, and it probably would never be heard of again. The same way they did, what was it? Navy Hill. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It had me in a wreck over here. I wanted to scream because it's, I mean, we just, yeah, like I said, we just caught up in history repeating itself. And the urban revitalization, I was just telling them, we went to a meeting with the city officials and everybody, and they was just telling us the same thing. In 2 more years, where I'm living at now, it might not even be there no more. They're going to turn them down, and they said, you know, we're going to keep the residents involved. We're going to bring y'all back. Y'all going to be a part of all the decision making and all this good stuff. It was music to their ears, but it came in one and went out the other because it's just the BS, you know.
So you said it was emotional. What would be an emotion if you're...
Mad and disgusting. I mean, seriously, how all of it. It's just history repeating itself. It's still happening. All these years. Yeah, that's it. I mean, she can go.
Can I have one thing on her?
Sure, really quick.
I've just heard there's a ballot initiative on the Constitution this election that will not allow eminent domain for private development. Eminent domain could only be used for public development, and that might have something to do
So
with it.
taking someone else's land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The government taking someone's
For
land.
private
Building for
development.
property
Yeah,
value
so
and
it's a
building,
good,
yeah.
the amendment is for preventing that, I believe, so if you vote for that.
Yeah.
Some highlights over here. Yes, ma'am.
Well, okay.
Sure, please.
Well, my comment is, I was very upset with that. I'm glad I saw it. My story goes for 3 generations. My grandmother, my mother, and myself. My grandmother was in Navy Hill. Then they had to go buy or rent out a house because they're going to tear Navy Hill. That's where the school was. I was a student at Navy Hill School. Very wonderful school. The kind of school where you have to walk up the steps and ring the bell. Oh yeah, I did. Anyway, it was a very good school, but that whole neighborhood went away and those residents moved away. My grandmother moved to Churchill area thinking she got a wonderful, where she moved to, the house is still standing. We lived in Jackson Ward, a couple blocks from Navy Hill. My mother was forced out of her house on 3rd Street to move into the new Fairfield Court in 1968. Me and my brothers, I get emotional. My brothers was the first students in Fairfield Court School, which was beautiful. At that time, I moved away, but when I came back to visit, I see the highway going through, the White Parkway in there everywhere. But I'm said, well, Mom, what's going on? She said, I don't know, honey, but I'm living in in Fairfield Court, but I was offered a home in West End where they'll take this house from this location and put it back there. And if you're a good tenant and you have working people in your house, you can go in this house and just think about it. You'll be able to buy this house. This is my mother. She's thinking 40 years ago she could buy this house. Okay, during that 40 years, my grandmother passed away, never seen Navy Hill no more, and that plaque for Navy Hill that was found in the garage of the biochemical place, if whoever found it never saw that plaque, Navy Hill is all forgotten about. These are hard-working black people. They're not. They maybe say they are in poverty, but if these black people had food, they had the little chickens in the back and the collard greens in the garden. If they ate, they felt rich. They didn't feel like they were in poverty. Only another person got to say, you living in poverty. I'm not going to say I live in poverty because I work. My mama worked. My grandmother worked. So that 48% poverty, because of the public housing, the projects given, and my little houses and scattered houses, they got that name. No good, poverty, poor people. I pay my taxes. My mama paid her taxes. My grandmother paid her taxes. And I see this, they're doing this to us now. Whoever they are, we have to stop saying, well, they're going to do this. Who are they? Who are they? We got a lot of people now that's more educated and can go and find out information. The computer, you can find anything out of the computer. So it's no excuse for us to work together and make a change, because them people, whoever they, I'm going to say they, Mr. or Mrs. They, do away with them and put us in charge.
Thank you. Other highlights or trends?
He said that just similarly, it's history repeating itself. Folks saying they were angry, disgusted, saddened by the presentation. He talks about, why don't they plan? Like, if they know that they're gonna do away with the neighborhood, they should build affordable homes for the displaced people before a neighborhood is demolished. And talks about how, there's, especially in Richmond, that there's too much land all over to have projects. People should be able to move into single-family homes.
I want to ask one question. Sure. How many of y'all in here is from Richmond and not from out of town? Yes, right. Raise your hand. All of you from Richmond, do that. And it's not, like I said, it's not from Richmond.
You wasn't born here. Was you born here, raised here, raise your hand.
Because I mean, these places that we are talking about here in Richmond, it comes from what our family was born and raised here in Richmond. Some good times and there was some hard times. So the people that don't really know too much about it, but I can tell you a story very way back, I guess before y'all was even born. But y'all listening to these tapes, but y'all never did experience nothing that's going on while these tapes was concerned. Through all of these years, and my family had to go through too, and it was emotional. I know all about food. I know all about old Churchill. You call East End, West End, low rated. I mean, we black folks where we poor, but we live good. Being poor people, we live real, comfortable. Let's put it like that. So when that thing came up on there, it kind of made me feel a little bit on down low side too, because when you say low-class people, what other kind of way could you live with the economy continue to change over and over and over? Instead of we going up like almost now, they're trying to put us back down again. They're trying, but I don't know, it might work and it might not work. So, but anyhow, I'm gonna say a black man. I was there. I really just stay on top of this ladder. Now, I don't want to go back down the same ladder that I came up. And my family, we're not going to do it. So I have to read just had it, my opinion. I got a horse because I had to sing in church every day. But anyhow, this is my opinion about to the people that don't know anything at all about Richmond, Virginia. Don't know nothing about the city, don't know nothing about the counties, a whole lot of don't know nothing. The only thing they go on by what's on a piece of paper. And a whole lot on that piece of paper, excuse my expression, ain't worth a damn. Excuse me, this is my opinion about this there because you got to live here to know about you.
One of the things that, in a few of the comments that I've heard, that comes to mind, a friend who does this work often says when people say our schools are failing, or our neighborhoods are failing, our communities are failing, what really we should be saying is our neighborhoods are doing exactly what they were designed to do. That these were set up to exist a certain way, and individual people can work to change that. But this was not an accident. This was not a mistake. There were people who were doing some of these things.
Right.
I want to hear if we can get just a few more highlights.
We have. I was going to quote you, so Kelly said the devil's not creative, and what she meant by that, she was talking about Richmond being, you could say, as a boilerplate for a lot of other places in the country. And this isn't unique, but that doesn't make it less terrible. And then just what struck me, I'll own this one, is I was overwhelmed by how entrenched housing and highways are. In other words, through all the exploitation to create that infrastructure took a lot of energy. And so now in order to create a new set of infrastructure, we have to work against that. Whole decades and centuries of building up, and that was leaving me a little bit overwhelmed.
So acknowledging that history and working against.
And I just want to say quickly, I appreciate him saying that, but what I meant, and I appreciate your comment, sir, because it's so true, we have to live it. But what I wanted to say is I'm from Columbus, Georgia, and there's a place called The Bottom. Yeah. I went all over the South in a civil rights tour. Every city I went to, there was a place called The Bottom, or some version of The Bottom. I went out to Seattle, Washington, and lived there 8 years in a place that's utopia for black folks, or the black folks who are there think. There's a place called Coons Hollow in a city that, black folks did pretty well. So I'm saying that Richmond is a microcosm for what happened all over this country. They redlined in Seattle. There was one little black lady who sold houses that started to put black families just over the line, and that's how the line went away. But this happened all over this country, and that pain resonates all over for lots of people. And so this story needs to be told, and what happens in this group to resolve this problem and to bring awareness will feed the whole country as well.
So we were group 3, and we had a lot to say. Some people had lived through it. Some of us had lived through it, and others of us weren't even born yet, or weren't in Richmond at the time. I feel like a common theme was people not seeing how processes like who's behind the progress, or what some people call economic development. And so a lot of people not having the power to say what was happening in their communities. So
Something that I gathered from our conversations was that not forgetting that the colleges and BC in particular played a major role and continue to play a major role in the constant development and redevelopment of the city. Especially with the Biotech Center in Navy Hill, it's right on top of there. So.
Yes.
May I ask for a point of clarification for the gentleman's comment? Did you say that a lot of the members of the community? Yeah. That's fine. Did you say that a lot of the members of the community didn't know who the movers and shakers were? Is that what you were saying?
That's part of it. Just like we're using this big like they, but we don't really identify key individuals in terms of like city developers or people with specific business interests or people who are owning the property. And how that's happening.
Okay. Follow-up question: how motivated and aware are people in the community?
I just meant in terms of like our group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm just talking about it. Yeah.
No, fair enough. I just wanted to offer a suggestion. When I heard somebody that wasn't aware of what was going on and didn't know the movers and shakers, I was going to suggest that you probably promote taking trips to the city council way more often. I've been going for the last couple of meetings, and I noticed that there's not that much energy in there at all. So, unless I heard your comment wrong, I just
yeah, that's a suggestion.
Yes.
I'm sorry that I'm late, but on your board there, you asked the question, is history repeating itself?
Well, I put this statement because that's kind of the sentiment that I was hearing.
Okay. Yeah. I would like to go back to that and relate to an experience in this neighborhood that happened in 1982. In 1982, City Council decided that they want to extend a highway from the Martin Luther King Bridge all the way over to 64. This community rose up and they say, we are not going to let this happen. As a result of that, it did not happen. But at the same time the community said that, we said, we are going to come up with a plan as to how this community would be redeveloped. They stuck together. They also organized a development company that was responsible for building Churchill House in Fairmont Village. Now, this community is not helpless. If you decide that you want to prevent this from happening, you can do it. But you've got to organize, you've got to make a determination. We are not going to let this happen to our community. Now, one other thing I'd like to say is that one of the ways of fighting poverty is community development. Now, there is a need for housing. Back in 1982, we saw that there was a need for housing, particularly for the elderly in this community. And that is why we decided to build Churchill House. But, I just want to throw that out to you.
And one of the things I hear in there also is that part of that organizing is knowing the history. So if that 1982 story is not part of what people know, it's hard to have an example to build off of or to learn from.
Yeah, I would like to comment. I would like to respond to the sister's comments and the brother's comments there, just about the use of the word poverty and how, as a community, you naturally reject that word. And I think it's important because I think Dr. Measley did a piece that we've been talking about poverty for 30 years and nobody hears us. Because nobody wants to, everyone rejects the word, and I think we should reject it. And I think the conversation that we really need to be having, because like the sister said, we always worked and we never considered ourselves poor.
Right.
And when the brother over here said, I don't know who these low-class people are they talking about, the question is not poverty. The question is how do we build more wealth in our communities?
That's right.
And I think that's where the discussion needs to be moved to, on every level in this city. Just because no one, rich folk don't want to talk about poverty, middle class people don't want to talk about poverty, and neither do those who are considered to be poor. So let's start talking about building wealth. How do we build wealth, no matter where you are? If it is all 2 chickens and collard greens, then how do we get more of those? Whatever it is, I think that's the important conversation we need to start.
One of the things I fear in that is that I think folks in wealth don't talk about poverty for very different reasons than folks who are in poverty. So if I have wealth and I'm not talking about poverty, I may not know it. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not considering it in my decisions. And so maybe it's, how do we understand the experience of people, even if that word might be a trigger for some folks.
But isn't the counter to that, if I am wealthy and all these people who I thought didn't have no wealth start talking about wealth, wouldn't I have a little fear about that?
Potentially.
But could a wealthy person lose their job any day or now, and then what's going to happen to them then? Then they're going to be in poverty, because where they going to turn to?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I hear, and I wrote it, and we'll get to that as we move on. Being true to the time and the meal I smell. What I hear you talking about is redefining what wealth is and what poverty may be, and self-determination, doing that for yourself. Because we tend to label wealth as material. But what I heard her talk about was a wealth of resources, a wealth of capacity, and so it's being able to define for yourself and move on that agenda, okay? But if we could move on.
Sure, so we've talked quite a bit about the history and how we got here. And we want to wrap up talking a little bit about where we are today in terms of some of the neighborhoods.
And more to your point, where, like I said, I wrote this down because that's what I just kept hearing folks saying, is history repeating itself, or looking at history repeating itself. And what I want to draw your attention to here, you remember the bullseye that we had earlier? This is a blown up picture of the bullseye. And I want to draw your attention to the area that we are specifically talking about, the East End area. But as you see, it's happening in the north, and it's happening to a lesser extent in some areas in the south. But what these lighter colors represent are areas where in 2009 there were greater than 20% concentration of poverty, okay? 2000, I'm sorry, 2000 is blurred.
And in 2000.
And in 2009, it is less than 20% poverty by the definition of the census definition. So what that tells us is you now have a changing dynamic in these communities. And as we heard the sister, she's gone already, we've heard the sister state, they're going to try to move us out, and where are we going to be? And so the question and what I was listening for in your comments and what I pulled out of your comments is, what do we do now? Or what can we do now? So that we can prevent history from repeating itself, if that's in fact what we see.
I have a question. If they're going to move us out the houses that we in and put us back in the project, and then they're going to tear them down, then where they going to put us? That's crazy.
Well, see, and that's a great question, and I think that's a question that needs to be presented if you're at the table. So we want to talk about what you can do even to be at the table, okay? Again, I pulled this from the comments that I heard around the room. So it may not have been something that you directly said, but I could hear it in what was being spoken. What I heard was vote. This gentleman talked about a ballot referendum that would make your voice known about eminent domain, right? Okay? So, and there is power there. As we saw, when Navy Hill, that referendum first came about, citizens came together and they voted it down. Okay? Twice, right. And so there is power in that. Now, the other thing that I heard in the conversation is discover who they are, the infamous they. The cloak and dagger they. And the suggestions I heard is show up at city council meetings where folks are talking about these types of things. I heard you talk about uncovering the they, to make it known who they are and what they are trying to do in our communities and why. And be present in that conversation. And that is going to require networking and maybe some thinking in ways that we haven't thought about before. Advocate for adequate housing for all. I think I heard that coming from the back. I summarized it. Advocacy, it can be powerful as well. Acknowledge the history and work against it. That's what I heard from over here. The sister, I think Kelly Brown, she's left, she talked about this happening all over the nation. So it's not just happening here, and we need to be able to affirm that it has happened and that it is happening, and then build up that energy is what I thought I heard, to fight against it, because it was tremendous energy that caused it in the first place. Organize, unite, and work a plan. Okay, sometimes it's not enough just to organize and unite. Sometimes we got to create a plan and work that plan to have some alternate happenings in our communities, as the gentleman here spoke a few minutes ago. Know and share the history, because not everybody knows. Richmond has an influx of new residents who didn't grow up here. Like this gentleman said, we may not have even been born while all this happened. I know I'm a Richmond resident. I grew up, and a lot I did not know about the city until I came back as an adult, okay? So we weren't even talking about it when I was growing up, and it was only 20 years after a lot of this happened. So we've got to know it and share it so people are informed and can make informed decisions about their lives. And yes, I stole it, reframing the discussion, self-determination, okay? They can say that folks are living in poverty because they're looking at money, resources. But we can say folks are living with assets and wealth because they work together. I don't know about you, but when you don't have a lot of monetary resources, you got to work together, you know? And so it's reframing that discussion and coming to it on your terms, so to speak, so that you have more options.
The picture of the Navy Hill School, what year was that?
I'm sorry,
that picture you had of the Navy Hill School, what year was that?
I don't offhand. We can pull it up, but. Okay, so it's in the early 50s?
In the 50s?
Yeah.
Oh, it over way.
So they were gone in the 50s.
He's going to share it.
I used to go to the I'm just 70 years old.
So we want the conversation to continue, and there are going to be opportunities for it to continue as you're having dinner. If there are more things you want to add, we'll leave the board up here and markers if you want to come up and write additional action steps. We want to build some knowledge and some shared ideas for how we can move forward. For now, though, we want to hear from T, who has the important instructions for how we're going to get our dinner.
Let's give Jonathan and Q a wonderful round of applause. As we prepare to go into dinner, I want to say two things. The first thing is, well, I actually want to say three things. The first thing is, I've seen this DVD numerous times. The thing that inspired me more than anything is the story about 6 Mount Zion. And the reason 6 Mount Zion inspired me is because people stood up and prevented the demise of it. That is something that if we get in our spirits, if we stand up, we can prevent the demise in our communities. The second thing, history can be a strength or a deterrent. The power of understanding history is you can identify where the problem is. We can allow history to make us angry, or we can identify history, or we can recognize history to help us identify where the problem is. Too often doing community work, we don't fight the root. We fight the results of the root. And until we fight the root, then we continue to fight and address the causes of the roots. So if we look at history from a perspective that now I understand what I didn't understand, now I know how to fight. Okay? So we can allow history to make us mad, but I hope we get fighting mad and not just mad. Okay? So I wanted to share that as we move into dinner. And this is the other thing that I'm supposed to say. For those that have not signed in, if you would sign in so that RePHRAME will have information to keep you in the loop. The second thing is, as we eat dinner, we also need you to, one at a time, because we don't have but one computer. We thought we were going to have 5 or 6, but we need to get on the computer and sign a petition. And I guess y'all wondering what petition. It's a petition that that will deal with housing, education, job creation, transportation, and advocacy. Okay? So while we are lining up to get something to eat, those of you that's in the back of the line, you may well go and get on the computer, get it over with, so we'll have half the people getting food, half the people signing up, signing the petition, and then the other half will be getting food, and we will just swap like that. Excuse me? They have some help in the back. I would like to pause real briefly to just bless the food. Father, we thank you for this day, for this time, for this food and this fellowship. We ask you to bless it, that it might be strengthening and nourishing for our bodies. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. So we can line up for the food. There is pizza as well as spaghetti. And the petition can be signed in the back.